Hey everyone, right on the hour now. We will no doubt have a load more people joining us very, very soon, but we will get started. We're here today to go through and fix the 3 hidden profit leaks inside, very specifically around ConnectWise Manage. So my name's Adam Ross, and we'll go over to the next slide with the today's speaker. So my name is Adam Ross. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called CloudOlive. I'll share a little bit of detail exactly on some of the pains and issues that we look to address. I'm personally really looking forward to the next hour with Darren, mainly because of his depth and understanding around ConnectWise, of course, but also the broad spectrum and all the challenges that MSPs face across the globe in his 25 plus years you've been working in the MSP space. So I'll hand it over to Darren just to do a short introduction for himself.
Yeah, lots of grey hair because of it as well. Welcome everybody. Yeah, so founder of Scalable MSP, also been in this world for 20 odd years, like we've said, in different capacities, either being an employee, an owner, or just an MD. In that journey, did a lot with the community and actually realized that the biggest thing is you just need to do as you're told. So when you think about ConnectWise, put it in how they've designed it and it actually works, and stop thinking that you know better. And that's my whole philosophy, really.
Very good. And today's format, if you will, is going to be very much a conversation. So I would urge people, if you've got a specific question for myself or Darren, just pop them into the chat. We've also got our collective teams on the sidelines to be able to help us and direct us as well. So in terms of what CloudOlive does, I thought it the best just to, one, show an infographic on the left. Okay, so our job is to sit in front of ConnectWise Manage and interface with any of the suppliers that you're reselling on a monthly basis. So there's a QR code if you wish to download a case study of a large MSP, but I think quite typical in the challenges that they face, that when they're running 10 plus different suppliers, that they just never had a single view to work out where they were underbilling or overbilling, or the costs were accurate back into ConnectWise. Through a number of different acquisitions and just being in ConnectWise for a really long time, there are a number of downstream challenges that they were facing, such as losing revenue on recurring billing items, not really having any idea of the number of assigned users to their Microsoft licenses, which made it really difficult when NCE or trying to manage NCE at that level of scale. And CloudOlive over the last 5-6 years has just worked on incrementally solving all of the challenges that that MSPs face when managing across multiple different suppliers while they're growing. So feel free to download that from the QR code, a short case study of Centaurus, and you can learn more about what CloudOlive does through that. So in terms of today's catalog, Darren and I spent a little bit of time trying to think of what are the key topic items that we both believe are paramount to MSPs, and also really common challenges that people generally just do without taking the time prior to build really solid foundations, and partly because the information is just not readily available. So we're going to spend time and have a Q&A with one another around service catalogs. Naturally, something very close to our heart at CloudOlive in terms of vendor reconciliation, with a slightly broadening horizon around that. And then MRR and getting paid quickly on time, and what Darren's coined is the cost conversion cycles. There will be a point at the end for Q&A, providing there's time, but I really would suggest that if there's something that's sort of comes up to yourself as we're going through it, just fire them away. And we'll go into the next slide on the first topic. So the service catalog, to me, I'll go there and say that to me, this is over the last, say, 6 years of building CloudOlive, and I was working at Auditask for a decade prior and an MSP before that. With that collective 15 years of looking at this lens when it comes to monthly recurring billing, This to me stands out as the single most important decision to get right in your PSA to make it easy for admin finance teams to know exactly what they're doing on a monthly basis and to reduce the risk that you inherently have around revenue leakage or inaccurate billing altogether. So, Darren, I'd be really curious from your standpoint. You're obviously working with tons of MSPs, and this was one that we collectively said, yes, I agree that this one should go up front. You've got a whole framework around this these days. I'd love to learn a bit about the journey almost of that to where you are now and the way you think about this area.
Yeah, so this is our number one asset in consulting. When we start off with a customer, typically we're sort of peeling back the layers of an onion, and they're coming with, our service team can't deliver correctly, our response times aren't right, we think we need more resource, our MRR billing takes us 10 days before we send it out, it's always late. The owner has to be fully involved with collating that MRR because I just can't extract myself from it. There is sales and technical friction because we sell something and then we say we are or aren't delivering it. There's customer churn because of it, and all these different layers of that onion actually comes back down to we've got pixie dust. We sell something, we onboard something, we invoice something, but we're not really that sure what it is, or we're very sure per customer, but you now need to understand a level of understanding of the per customer relationship and the technical thing and what we're doing, which is typically an owner or a senior salesperson, to actually pull back what we're actually doing for each customer. And I saw this in my own MSPs where we were going through iterations of what we thought were new services, we thought we'd onboarded them, we thought we'd launched them well within our MSP. But if you went round a little bit like a secret investigator and asked a tier one person, what would you do if this happened? Or you went to a salesperson and said, what would you do if this happened in a customer? Would we do it or would they do it or something else? You'd literally get 40 different answers.
Yeah.
So we really started to nail down, actually, the core problem here is we've got all these Chinese whispers. We've got all these problems in delivery because we don't know what it is. But also our customers leverage that. So subconsciously or consciously, they know that we don't know. And so they ask for everything and we answer yes. And then when we do something wrong on the thing that's extra, they slap us around the back of the head and we have to do some more for free because we did it in the first place. So we got to a point where our service was just whatever they asked for, to the point where we actually launched 5 core IT services again with new names, same delivery as what the leadership team thought it was, but different names, because that was the only way we could actually get it back into the business in one narrative. So, it got that far apart from what we actually thought it was. We had to almost scrap it and start again.
And can I ask, just digging in underneath it, is that primarily around packages or bundles, if you will, in using that terminology? That's where the main problem began to arise, or just in general, one-to-one?
This was everywhere. This was packages, it was general, it was bespoking, it was the good old, we've got this lead and it's massive and we need to fix it, but they're asking for something different. And it's only a little thing, but we'll just do it. And then you end up doing it. But then every customer that comes along is just this little thing that's different. And then when everyone knows for the first couple of weeks, month 2, someone does the standard that's not the different. And you get slapped in the back of the head for it. Yeah. So we just started to really drive into this because what was actually happening was the bottom line wasn't where it needed to be because we were over delivering and not charging correctly and not able to cross sell some other packages or services, depending which way you want to call it, because actually we were doing it today. So we couldn't sell, the equivalent of managed 365 tenant because we were doing it today. So what was the ROI for the customer?
Yeah. And how many staff did you have at that time, or give us an idea of the scale you were at when you ran into that problem and decided to fix it for yourself?
So it was definitely in direct relation to that. And I think I'd not thought about that before, actually. So that's a great question, Adam. So it was definitely in relation to that. So when you think about different, we call them ceilings. So talk about different growth ceilings. So you've got a ceiling at 7 users, ceiling around 20 users, ceiling at 50 users, ceiling at 120 users, 170 users and thereafter. At each level of those ceilings, you've got to run the business differently. I'm sure everyone's heard the fact that who gets you here today isn't going to get you there tomorrow. And that's that different layers. So when we were 7 people, not having a firm service catalog didn't really matter because everyone sat outside of each other. Everyone knew the customers, everyone knew the sales, everyone knew the small handful of people we dealt with. Everyone knew where an engineer was at any one time. When we got to 30-ish and 40 people, now you're in a world where you're bringing in one net new employee a month, for instance, when we were really growing, and you've got people out on customer sites that I didn't even know who your customers were unless the system told me. So now you've got this very much a spread of you've got to become process and structured and drive it forward. And I think if we'd have done it earlier, we'd have probably grew even faster and especially with more profit, because in the middle of that journey, what we did is we ended up running a very expensive tanker that made no money. And that's when we changed what we were doing. Prior to that, we were making good money and we were in the boom of all different things that were going on. But we really hit a problem when the recession hit 10 years ago.
Yeah, okay. Actually, the reason behind my call is because I was just thinking back to whenever we have a new ConnectWise user sync into our system, we have a view where we can just see all of the different accounts and recurring billing items. And the first thing I do is look at the naming conventions that are there. And I know instantly if it's easy or hard, if it's a headache or if it's a breeze for teams to manage within the MSP, or have a general gauge anyway. And we often find that there are certain MSPs that do this really, really well. Perfect naming convention and the right number of product IDs actually that exist within the system. And then you got the other two sides where it's at the extreme, multi-acquisition that's come along, and they might have 7 different antiviruses, all duplicated in some capacity, and it's impossible to read. It's impossible to report on, I should suggest, and impossible to decommission as well.
Yeah, and I think as well as looking at employee count, I think you've also got what is the owner's role in the business. So small MSPs is going to be principal-led selling. The owner is going to do it. So I think you go through 2 journeys in that as well. So you go from an owner capturing any sale they possibly can, and they've got all the levers and all the control and all the ability to randomly sell whatever they want, at whatever names they want, at whatever prices they want. And then in the middle, they sort of realize that actually we need to do some sort of structure here. And then when they start to grow a sales team, if they don't put a structure around the sales team, they go back to day dot and the sales team starts to tell everything that they want to sell without any guide rails or etc. Then eventually they get to maturity. So I think you sort of go from 0 maturity up again and then down to 0 maturity and then back up again, because it depends on where you're at in your journey and what control you have over that. If you're a smaller business, it's probably owner that is doing the cycle within ConnectWise. We have a 1 sales order, an opportunity. We convert that opportunity to a sales order. We convert that sales order to an agreement, products, etc. So they've got all that control as an owner to do that, but that can be dangerous as well. And I think the other thing is we then start to grow teams. So it's not just one person doing multiple facets of the same thing, and they can sort of control that. They don't need it written down. Now we need processes and controls to manage that growing team.
Yeah. And to give an idea of the service catalogs, when we look at them and go, yeah, this is a really clean setup. There's logic behind it. It's been well thought out. One of the biggest ones, and I would say that certainly more than 50% of MSPs we look at, certainly when we focus in on Microsoft, do now have all the different commits and billing frequencies and everything broken apart. Like there could be 3 per license type, but I don't know, 20 to 25% of MSPs still just have a single SKU per business premium and just link it all together. And what we've learned is even if you have something like that, Even the biggest and the best distributors that have their native integrations trying to update these things, they get confused. So you can only imagine what's going to happen to a new staff member that's come in, getting familiar with MSP world, getting familiar with MSP billing, and then like nothing is logical, nothing's really making sense. And it goes to having the structure once the owner is no longer the single person, I guess, that can watch over everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you look at your service desk, for instance, your technical team, if when you're hiring a service desk individual, if you've hired someone that's come from this industry, so let's just say they have got all the ability that you've hired them for, if it takes you more than a month to start getting ROI, so more than 4 weeks to start getting ROI, there's something wrong with your systems and processes and structure. Because what you're actually saying then is they have the ability, but we have to teach them every intricate thing about our customers and the main contacts and the line of business and the services we do and the services we don't do. So you can't allow them to log on to anything until you've imparted that information out of your head. That shouldn't be that type of journey. It should be, right, okay, I'm going to onboard you to our systems, our processes, our structure, our culture, our values, and the way we do work and the way we communicate. Those are the systems to answer all your questions. When you go into a ticket, you go into a customer, you go into a service, those are the information that you need, and you can read it logically, quickly, and act on it.
So if there's a aspiration of hiring a new staff member next month, let's say, what should MSPs be thinking about now if they know heart of hearts that that process and systems is not in place, but the offer letter's already gone out?
Yeah, you're a little bit stuck in a month. But let's go a little bit larger. I mean, you think about service catalog, you've got different maturities of a service catalog. If you think about just a very simple one-page Excel document that has SKU, product, chart of account code, retail price, cost price, margin, and a description of what it is. That's sort of like day one, what we would call maturity level 1. If you go all the way up to maturity level 5, that is then a framework that has 4 documents per service. One is what we call the Bible, so that's the control document. Then we have 3 documents, one for each department, finance, technical, and sales, that's written in their languages that tells them what's in and what's out and what are the conditions and what are the products. Things like DDs, it's in arrears, it's in advance. Here's what we do for onboarding. Here's the scale of onboarding. Here's the time frame for onboarding. Here's the products we use. Here's the battle cards. And here's the things we don't do, if you're thinking about a sales document. But a delivery document, a technical one, will be more about here's the infrastructures and systems and software we do, and here's the things we don't do, and here's the typical requests that we don't do that are actually projects. So it really frames it, but the Bible itself controls it. So that then means that everyone stays on the same page because each department can control that same document. So the Bible would say, let's say it's backup. The Bible would say this is 128-bit encrypted minimum. It's in 3 locations and it doesn't need any manual intervention. So then the technical document can reference them core criteria, controls, but technical could change the backup solution. They could change the vendor. As long as it matches those 3 controls, nobody needs to know. If they change the vendor and it doesn't match those controls, then you have to get the service team back together, a cross-functional service team, to agree that change. That now means when we're promising something in the sales area that it's going to be 120-bit encrypted, if it isn't, we're all aligned to that. And we're all now not delivering, not over-promising or under-delivering that service. And so because you've got that, when you hire your tech, he then has, my IT support is very clear, it's this and it's not this. And that's what we do.
And just for everyone, there's a couple of giveaways towards the end of this webinar as well. And there's a couple of resources from Darren and Scalable that I think will be really, it will tie in very closely to the elements and the frameworks that we're discussing here today. If there's, I suppose, is there anything else to add, Darren, around service catalog that you can think of, or anything else we should discuss before moving on to the next topic?
The other main thing that we do in consulting is thinking about the end in mind. So we don't start with ConnectWise configuration. We don't start with here's 20 tick boxes. Which ones do you want to do? we start with the end in mind. So when you think about a service catalog, what data do we want to report on? So as an example, do we want to look at gross margin and profit at customer level? Or do we want to look at gross margin and profit at single service level or package level? Or do we want something else? So what is that data output that we want? That now says, here's how we're going to configure ConnectWise. So for instance, if we want service gross margin levels, then we've got to have a notion that inside ConnectWise, when we look at agreements, we're going to have each service split into its own agreement. Then we're going to have the notion that on service, when they log tickets against 365 or IT support or backup, inside that ticket, they will choose the right agreement. Now we're going to get the highest cost of delivery, which is their time. We put in the fully burdened cost in the members card in ConnectWise. Now we can run reports that says, inside a customer, we've got 10 services. Each service delivers this revenue. Each service is this cost of delivery, i.e. licensing, soft costs, and then hard costs of labor, because we can look at the fully burdened rate times by that, the time for every single person that put a ticket on that contract in the last period. Now we can look at true profitability of our MRR services and compare that to benchmarking, which is really key when you think about the biggest asset you're building in your MSP for a sale, or even just to get income and loans on your business, is going to be MRR. That's the asset we're building. So we want to really make sure that we're looking at the end goal, what's the data, and what's the complexity of ConnectWise. Because at each layer of that maturity, whether it's we're going to look at customer gross margin, service gross margin, or we're going to look at package gross margin, at each layer of that, the level of complexity in ConnectWise gets more. But I agree with that, because if it's going to create a value, an ROI inside your business, then you understand why we're doing it more complex. If we're never going to use that data, then I'll move you up a level and say, let's configure it at this higher level. And no, we don't ask us that complexity. But we have a structure and a process and a journey workflow that tells everybody every step and why we're doing it. That's the important bit, why we're doing it, because then you've got somebody converting opportunities that might be a sales package, so it's one line, but we actually want that converted to 5 different lines to deliver that data and to deliver the operational structure that we need. And then we're going to group that back up in an invoice group. So the customer sees quote one item, invoice one item, but in the middle, we have a delivery structure. So we can look at gross margin, and we can also, the service team with, here's the services we do. So here's the services we don't do. So if, for instance, we do SentinelOne as our EDR, but this customer has decided to do that elsewhere or internally managed, if they ring up about a SentinelOne problem, an S1 problem, we're going to say, in theory, no to that request, because the technician can see that very clearly inside their service records.
And when you go and begin asking those questions, what layer do you want to see? Who doesn't come back to you and say, well, we want to see everything, Darren? And then you go and you challenge them a little bit further and you walk away with 1 or 2 of those elements that is actually what they need?
Definitely, yeah. You give a child a bag of 10 sweets, they're not going to say, I just want 1, Dad. They're going to say, I want 10. So we've got to challenge that and say, okay, yeah, but where you are today, is that a stretch? So often what we do is we take people through the maturity ladder. So we go from a 1 to a 5, but we build it like brick layers. So we can take you through those layers, and you might decide at layer 3, that's enough.
It's good enough, yeah.
That's good where I'm at. I've now got the data I need. Now let me push this business forward, and I'll come back to you when I want layer 4. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm a big believer of, like I say, creating the data and the complexity where it's needed. But I get people asking me for reports, and I say, when are you going to look at that? And they say once a year. And I say, well, you're going to create a cost of delivery inside your business and a complexity that you're going to look at once a year when you decide to have a coffee at nighttime. Like, why are you doing that?
Yeah. You want to bring up the next slide now, and we'll just discuss everything around vendor reconciliation. I would suggest that there's been a lot of focus and emphasis on technicians and senior management when it comes to tooling in the MSP space over the last 15, 20 plus years with RMMs and lots of fancy tools. And admin finance teams have sort of been left by the wayside. And I still think that this is probably the most analog, manual, scrappy, horrible part of
Yeah.
an MSP where it's just
Well,
files
well, the thing
basically
is,
flying everywhere and
the
it's all
business
complex.
owner's typically technical, isn't it? The business owner is a technical minded person, and
Yeah,
what you're thinking is, I'm selling technical people, I'm selling technical service, so I'm going to spend all my time in the technical world.
yeah. Big time, yeah. And it's there's so many edge case nuances in every MSP at specific customers that people in the MSP currently know, and then new people come in. It comes back to this inability to scale, right? Where there's too many of these fancy, weird cases that happen. I just want to give one to highlight how big of a financial burden and absolute, I wouldn't even say it's quiet erosion these days, because everybody's got a horror story of, oh my God, we haven't built that BCDR device for how long? What do we
Yeah.
do now with that? Do we go back to the customer or not?
Internet connection is my favorite. We sparked up an internet connection, or we've deactivated an internet connection, and we're either overbilling or underbilling.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, we had one the other day of that they'd been getting billed for it for the last 60 months of that thing and not on billing, and they're just like we can't reclaim any of that. Let's just
Yeah,
start
because
billing it now.
it's embarrassing. It's
It is,
embarrassing,
yeah.
isn't it? You're not going to go back to them and go, oh, by the way, we've not really been doing our jobs for the last 60
Yeah.
months, because instantly they go, well, actually, if you can't invoice me correctly, does that mean you're not delivering my IT correctly?
Yep. Or even worse, right, where you're overbilling a client for a really long period of time. Like
Yeah,
the fear is, what do? You just drop it off and hope they never see it, or actually you go back to them and give them back 5, 10,000 pounds potentially at some points. But one of the I think a figure that I learned a number of years ago, which has really stuck with me, is if you miss a license so you incur a cost on a Microsoft license and you fail to on-bill that for the month, the margin for that specific service has been eroded for 6 months. Okay. And just to expand that out, if you miss 2 months, right, and you've got hundreds of customers and hundreds upon hundreds of different SKUs and renewals and all blah, 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 you miss 2 months worth of billing. That year, all of your margin has completely been eroded.
yeah,
And that
because
works off of,
Microsoft's such small margin to start off
yeah,
with.
it works off about, and that's just around the 16% margin mark that a lot of MSPs are. But it just brings into focus, there's small margin, but little mistakes actually means it renders that part of the business potentially, if there is a gap and an issue, completely unprofitable for you forever. Right? You're
Yeah,
now scrapping and you're trying to make your industry benchmark growth targets and goals and EBITDA and everything else off of other areas of the business. And it's just hard. It's just really,
yeah,
really, really hard thing to do. Um,
yeah, because
yeah,
it comes back to, if your packages aren't correct, your service catalog's not correct, well, that then means you've got all these different products inside ConnectWise. So if you go to agreements and additions tab, that's going to show you all the products that are live today across your customer base. But if they're randomly named and randomly packaged, that like one package is called, Starship Enterprise, and it's got three different vendor costs in there. But another customer's got Starship Enterprise and it's got 5 different vendors in there. Well, no one understands that apart from the person who's delivered it. Or maybe there's some notes somewhere in IT Boost and we need to go digging there. Well, that's just not going to happen. So, what I like to start off with in our net new consulting engagements is asking them, can you tell me when you last reconciled your ConnectWise bill? Because that's probably your biggest bill if you also do other additional services like security with them. So if you're doing ConnectWise ecosystem, you've got security, you've got Acronis, for instance, you've got SOC, it's probably your biggest bill. When did you last actually reconcile that? And when you look at your 365, do you reconcile that, or do you just rely on the integration? You look at internet connectivity, you look at VoIP. So what we're actually thinking is, let's say VoIP, we think we're doing excellent margin at 70%, but we've missed the fact that they've increased for the last couple of months and not told us, but they've gone up 4% every month, let's say. And also we've got some things that we disconnected with customers, but we haven't actually disconnected them with the vendor, or we asked them and they didn't do it. Then we also compile that with, in my experience, the last 2 years of the core supply chain for MSPs, their invoicing has been dreadful. Yeah. Because of their own M&A acquisitions, their own changing of platforms. There are so many cases where I know that the invoices have been dramatically wrong to the point where people have moved products, not because the product doesn't work, but because they can't actually invoice me correctly. And then you've got the fact that we're not looking at all of this. We could think that we're actually creating lots of margin in places, but we end up with nothing at the end. But we don't really know why. And some of that can be down to this actual mismatch of not reconciling vendors.
Yeah, and to go even deeper in it, like one of the things that we're really hot on, we'll come back to Microsoft because that's generally people's biggest bugbear, just because it's often a really large
often
cost,
the biggest
with thin margins, right? But too many times we've seen, so we talked about missing a license altogether, right? And that's it's easier to find and then fix, right? One of the really subtle ones that we see all the time is they're buying a monthly, and they're selling it as a monthly annual, as an example, out of their PSA. So 10 matches 10, business premium, everyone's happy, But actually, when you look underneath it, it's like you're literally making no money on it because there's roughly a 20% price difference between the two, unless nobody's making more than 20% on this stuff. So some are, but not often. So all of a sudden you're flat. Your ConnectWise is probably showing some profitability there, but the reality of it is your cost and the amount of money leaving your bank renders you making no money on this again. And that can live on indefinitely because it's so hard to flag because everything has the right properties semi-line, like it looks okay to the naked eye. That's one of the ones which we're very hot on, just very similarly because CloudOlive will go, this number is in red. This doesn't look good. Let's explore why that might be. Or of course the system just won't pair it in the first place.
Yeah, and to follow on from that, because you've got a package of some sort, you've got something you're billing monthly, but the software cost inside that is annually. But like you said, the numbers are wrong. And so you think you're aligned, but you're not. But it's quite a cobweb to unstruct. And it's only certain people in the business that can do that, which are typically the ones that have the least of time, costing you the most money, and don't have the patience to do it, like an owner. So it doesn't get done. And then you've got the added complexity of the service delivery journey. So if you don't have the right structure in service, when they're adding and removing services, because they've been asked for it, it's a license subscription or it's a 365 subscription, or we're just going to add this to the customer because they asked for it. If there's no flow back through the system into finance and understanding that, well, the vendor reconciling is your backstop. It's the ultimate stop to say, everything that's happened this month, do we align to this? Because humans are humans and process is a process, that they will fail at points. So your vendor reconciling is your backstop to say, before we send invoices, do we know our proper margins?
And then there's also another element to this where and this is a business decision that I think most MSPs they probably won't have a strict answer on, but it is, do we just bill whatever's on the invoice or on the whatever's deployed? Is that what we bill to the customer? Or do we go, hey, they've only got 10 staff here. Why on earth do they have 15 email signatures as an example? And there's 15 getting charged. There's 15 somehow deployed.
But then you've also got the complexities of it's not always what's active. So you could have in your example 10 users live. We all know that. We've got, our MM agent coming into ConnectWise. We can see all the assets. We can reconcile that. But actually, you might have some minimum commits. So they might have NCE with 365. They might have minimum commits on signature platforms. And so now it's not a case of just going, let's look at the agreement additions, filter it by customer, do these quantities equal 10? Because one might equal 10, 112, 115, 120 because of minimum commits. And so if you've got somebody that's doing that that's unaware, they're either not going to know what to do, or they're actually going to reduce all of them down to 10.
Yeah.
And now you've got minimum commits that you're going to get charged for that you're not passing on.
Yeah. Yeah. All too common. I think that one of the coming back to the private investigator running around the office is doing the similar thing, but going to different departments and going, hey, what's our source of truth for users? What if it's 10 this month and 11 this month? What's changed? What would you rely on? And just seeing the different answers that people would provide will be quite varied. And that because a lot of the revenue is often tied and with the users, and a lot of questions coming back from customers, because they can look around the office, the end client, and go, I got 10 people, why am I getting billed for 15 of this thing? But then mandating, or at least having a single line that people would use to go, yeah, this is how we do it in our business, helps sales, helps like the front end and the back end and everyone in between, of course, as well as importantly, the customer.
Yeah, I mean, going around the business and getting that, I suppose, source of truth from every single person would be very interesting in most businesses. That comes back to the service catalog. That data should be in the service catalog.
Yep.
You know, when we say this service is X, where is the quantity gained from? Is that CSP? Is it RMM? Is it something else? What is that? What's controlling it? So then everybody knows, you know, because otherwise you have people, for instance, deleting agents out of RMM when they shouldn't because they've just been put in a cupboard, but really we still want to bill for that. And now we find out 6 months later, we've not been billing for the 5 devices in the cupboard that we thought we were billing just because they've not been online. But really that's not the game. But someone saw it in the RMM and it was 2 months stale, so they deleted it. You know, those types of processes and flows can all be built into ConnectWise and supporting documentation. And often it's the journey. It's the journey that's in ConnectWise. So, you know, when you get a disconnect or an activation, are there tickets? Is there a journey for it? Should it go past multiple departments? Often what we find is it's a technical request, and so it stays in technical and dies in technical. But actually, should it have gone to the account manager first for authorization? Should it be a quote, or is it in service? Then it goes to technical to deliver, and then it goes to finance to sweep up the back end system and align the back end system to what we've just done if it's required. But how many people today have got that journey going? If we just look at that simple connection and disconnect of a piece of software or a physical connection, do we have a proper journey that's documented and proper accountability in each area to say, you know, inside ConnectWise, a really unused feature is categorization on tickets that creates a task list. So we can create a ticket, we can overlay a process that is the task list, and we can ensure then that that type of ticket in that categorization always follows that journey. So it moves around different departments and it gets ticked off in different departments to really process into that vendor reconciling. And then the stopgap is we actually get a bill and we reconcile it against what we have.
Darren, if you think about some of the best MSPs that you've been working with and that you've been helping, how many vendors roughly would they be working with?
I would say most mature MSPs are trying to work with the least amount of vendors. That's because they become a bigger fish. They have less relationships to manage, because that's the key as well. There is a real missing role in most MSPs, that no one is managing vendor relationships. Yeah. No one's understanding what their win is against our win, who's the relationships, who's the key people, how do we impact MDF funding and work together for an ultimate success, because we all want to grow. We all want to sell a license, for instance. So, you know, we've got to make sure that there's that structure there to it.
Yeah, and I suppose it's tricky with a couple buying everyone as they go, and maybe they originally didn't like one of those bigger players that have come along and snapped everyone up.
Yeah, and then they get moved around and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, you know, often what we find is most people are using 10% of any tool, whether it's ConnectWise Manage, IT Boost, BrightGauge, or into the wider ecosystem around other tools. You know, even yourself, Adam. We would say on average 10%, and that's because we don't have this vendor strategy. We don't have the vendor partnerships. We don't understand what good looks like. We buy a tool without understanding what it's going to fix and what's the ROI and what does good look like. We don't follow that project through. We don't have the time. We don't have the structure. And so what we actually do is we run after a shiny toy, we implement it by 10%, and we run after the next shiny toy. And what all we're doing is just creating extra costs to deliver the same ROI because it's not adding anything to the business. So we've got to really make sure that I would say the top MSPs are sub 10 vendors because they're really trying their best to drive into those vendors, drive into the solutions, and really maximize that relationship.
Yeah, across the board, right? Win, win, win. We'll go into the last slide, just mindful of 20 minutes or so to go. And I'm not sure if you copyrighted this or not, but you should do, or trademark it, whatever you do in the UK. I've been thinking a bit about the CCC in terms of the cost for conversion cycle. And I think it'd be awesome for everyone who on this call who hasn't heard it. I think it's going to be hit home for every business, but would love to hear your definition of it and how you came to it.
Yeah. So like everything that I do in consulting, it is not mine. I am not a genius in any way. All I've done is just picked frameworks up from different places and joined them together and said, that's what we do. You know, my opening saying here in this session was, you know, do as you're told. These systems, these frameworks are out there. People are successful with them. Stop thinking you know better. You know, re-engineering your service desk every 6 months is not good use of your time and definitely probably won't do it right. Follow ITIL, follow the PSA. That's what you should do. So when we think about MRR CCC, this is actually a financial term. And I first came across this when I was reading a book that talked about Dell. So Dell hired a new chief finance officer, and this is the only thing he's owned in for 5 years. And it actually meant that at the end of those 5 years, Dell was trading on other people's money. So if you think about CCC, what is it? It's all about the day you spend money, how long does it take you to get your money back? So if we think about this in MRR world that we've been talking around, if we sell IT support, through that month, we have cost of delivery, which is licensing, people, buildings, etc. If we only collect that money in arrears, that means we send an invoice out on the 1st of the following month when we've spent our money. So we spent money on the 1st of January, we sent an invoice on the 1st of February. If they're good payers and we've got them on 30 days, they're going to pay us by the 1st of March. So that means we've got a 60-day window. But most people, especially if they're not managing it correctly, have got an average of 45-day debtors. So now we're into 3 months cycle of running the business on our money, because that's what we're doing. We're adding costs that we spend and we only gain our money in 90 days time. That was exactly like Dell. So Dell was in a world where I think they was on, when he started, they were on 67 days cycle, and he turned that around in 5 years to turn it into a plus 23 days. So basically he got paid 23 days before he spent any of the money. So they were then able to aggressively grow the business without having a cash flow problem. You know, people talk about over trading. If you're growing your business way too fast, typically in an MSP world, if it's growth from professional services or too long CCC, eventually you'll grow it to cash because your cash funding won't match the growth. But the shorter the CCC means that you can grow faster with less risk. So this is where we would advise people to be doing upfront invoicing. So we bill you on the 1st, we collect it by direct debit on the 7th, we probably get the cash about the 10th. So that's 10-day CCC, because before we were into that full month, I've already been paid. And if you don't pay me, I know about that. So it also reduces my liability of me looking up and finding out if you're in some sort of debt concern or some sort of risk, and I can mitigate that out because I've got that in my contract to say that if I need to, I can change my payment terms with you to reduce that risk. So CCC is all about how efficient are we at delivering that MRR, or even professional services. You know, in the UK, and the businesses I was in, it was very popular in all my businesses to only produce a professional services invoice when the project was finished. Unless it was a big upfront hardware, then we would ask for a deposit on hardware. But really, labor, we would take the risk on that. So many businesses now I see in the MSP world that will actually either have at least a 50% down payment, if not 100% down payment, before we even start work. That is reducing the CCC because we're actually getting paid before I actually send you any labor costs. So it completely changes the whole structure of the business. If you think about very simple lemonade stall, I'm sure people have heard lemonade stalls conversation before, but it's how I explain it. So if we buy some lemon and sugar, we make some lemonade and we sell it, well, what we're actually selling there is on day one, I buy some lemon and sugar, it costed me £10. On day two, I make some lemonade. On day three, I sell it on my drive. So then on day three, I'm getting my money because you give me money to receive a lemonade. So that's a 3-day CCC cycle. So businesses to think about how much are we spending on something before we get a return? Because the longer that is, the more of our cash and the more risk we have to actually deliver this business.
And what when you speak with a new MSP these days, what's the status quo? What's normal, do you find, or what would you assume that they're likely going to be working to in terms of a CCC today?
Yeah, so professional services, definitely on like 90-day terms because labor's billed at the end on average projects. On MRR, most businesses I come across now don't do IT support in arrears, but they do other services in arrears. So my advice would be that we do everything in advance. So when you sign up, we bill you for that first day straight away. And we make sure our service catalogues, our agreements, our products, packages, or however we want to do it, and our invoicing is all very structured. Our vendor reconciling is kicking into that. Our finance team are on the ball. So when it gets to the first of the month, we've already done our vendor reconciling because we get our bills during that month. So we know where we are. So come the first of the month, everything's been vendor reconciled. Any net new services have already been converted and put onto the system. Any disconnects have been done and put onto the system. So on the first of the month, the only thing we have to do is actually import our CSP, which is literally, in most cases, a 20-minute job. We look at a application integration, we match it all out, we look at the reds, we sort them out, we press go. So then on the first day of the month, we send our invoices, and 99% of our customers are on DD. There's always an odd straggler that you can't get on DD, but a biggest percentage of our customers are on DD. So on the first of the month, we send them an invoice, it's payment in 7 days, we get our money by the 10th.
And so
most MSPs can't deliver MR invoicing on the first of the month. They're more like the 10th of the month before they're sending invoices.
And part of the 10th of the month, I find for some MSPs is if their largest distributor typically invoices them on the 5th or 6th of the month, then they're waiting for that to then figure some stuff out to then put it out. If you wanted to help and re-engineer that and still have them bill on the first prior to that, like the cost data actually arriving, what's the general, what would be your recommendation at that point?
Yes. So I would add, if I got a vendor bill on the 19th of every month, I would make sure that was reconciled by the 20th, and on the first of the month, those costs would go inclusive of those invoices.
And what if they're invoicing on the 6th of the following month for the last month, as an example? Because this is quite common with the likes of Pax8 for Microsoft. So on the 6th of April, they'll get all the March changes, as an example.
Yeah. So the biggest trend I've seen with Microsoft is definitely that. So you've got, for instance, the 6th or the 8th of the month. So typically what I would see in a mature MSP is all other services would lead the building on the first of the month. And Microsoft would be a second payment run that would happen on the 6th. Two reasons for that. One, because we can only reconcile it on the 6th and we don't want to hold up other invoices. But also the trend is that the customer has the most questions on Microsoft trending and pro-ratering and Azure consumption billing. And what we don't want to do is hold up that, I don't know, let's say £1,000 invoice for all our other services because they're debating a £20 cost in Microsoft. So what we want to do is split it. So then we say all the services we can control, we're going to send on the first. Services that we can't control, we're going to send on the 6th in a separate invoice. So if you debate one of them, it's not the thing that we make money on. Microsoft, we don't really make that much money on.
Yeah.
So you can debate that, but you don't hold up the core services.
Great. I'd say, great answer. It's always never had a succinct answer, I suppose, that was like, do this, or as you said, here's the trend, because I think this is a bit of an unknown for a lot of MSPs. It makes a lot of sense. And then the CCC, I guess, just kicks off from the 6th onwards, and you get paid 7 days later after that.
Yes. Yeah. But we're just reducing our risk and reducing our cash need all the time, because then we can use that cash to grow our business or marketing our business. You know, the most MSPs I speak to today, and probably for the last 5 years, but it's getting increasingly worse as every year goes on, is they can't grow. They can't grow the business. They can't get net new business. It's a massive struggle. And that is the case, that the trend is happening because people are locked into contracts, businesses are unease with what's going on in the world. But the biggest thing is they don't spend any money. So if I say to you, your child is really bad at their homework, and you say to your child, but I didn't see you do any homework last week, and they go, no, your first answer is going to be, well, do some homework. You can't get better unless you do it. So, most MSPs either know or don't know that they should be spending about 7% of their revenue in growth if they want to do 20% growth. But the people that do know still can't do it because they don't have the cash, because they're using the cash to run the business.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. Lee, do you want to bring it up? We'll go into the couple of giveaways now. So we've got one from a CloudOlive standpoint that we've looked to distill down a huge amount of value that I think, especially those in the UK going through financial year here very soon as well, put you in a good stead for next FY. And then Darren's got something as well that he will go through next. But so the 3 areas that we will help with, so think of it as a 90 days. So get started any point in March, and then for the next quarter, just run this in the background, tidying everything up, giving you like a bird's eye view on all the nuanced challenges that you're facing in a recurring billing world. So on the service catalog and vendor reconciliation point that we talked about earlier, was one of the weird things that we see a lot of MSPs do is they put the buy price and the sell price in the wrong fields, the cost and the price in the wrong fields in ConnectWise. So it's just best case you're making no money on it, but your reporting is completely skewed with it. So we've built it over the years, just something to just look at that. There's 15 lines probably like that. Go away and have a little look. The other 2 here are actually linking the system CloudOlive into ConnectWise Manage, and then having a live dashboard across every single product ID. And it's a really good place to begin doing an audit. It's also a really good place to be able to see, hey, if I've got 10 business premium, do I have 10 of this other user-based service? These things should be in lockstep, like a quality control check, if you will. And then really importantly, pick a vendor. Like Darren mentioned, if ConnectWise is your biggest, great. If it's Paxate, great. If it's Ingram, if it's something else, it's just one of the suppliers you'd be like, man, I'd really like just to have I'd like to not lay awake at night thinking if everything's okay. We're going to provide a 90 days, so 3 consecutive months where you can bring that in completely for free, and gradually just trim and make it perfect for yourself, right? So pick your supplier, run it through, and hopefully at the end of the day, you will have all the information you could possibly require in that, and then you can decide if it's worthwhile continuing on or not. But wanted to give you plenty of time to get to know what CloudOlive is all about. So there's a QR code. Welcome to do that short form, and then the team will get in touch and help you out with it. And then over to Darren's.
Yeah, so we've chose these two assets because I thought it actually directly linked to what we've just been talking about. So if you have your service agreements and you have your contracts and your agreements and your products and your additions inside ConnectWise correctly set out with the right chart of accounts linked to them, then the 5-year profit plan is definitely the one for you. Or even if you just open that and go, actually, these are the pots that we should have, and this is where we want to go to in our next structure of chart of accounts and products and agreements and structure inside ConnectWise. So the 5-year plan is going to pull in that revenue and say, here's all the different pots of where we are at the end of this financial year, which for some of you will be the end of this month. And then it's also going to plot out all your costs of delivery. So all your back office costs, all your sales and admin, your building, etc., and tell you some key metrics that you can then bench across best-in-class benchmarking. So most KPIs we would use in consulting have got a benchmarking to say, it's not my feeling on my journey that says you should get 50% or 52% gross margin. It's actually benchmarked against the industry. And then what we're going to do is plot out the next 5 years, because the biggest thing I get when people come to me is, Darren, I want to sell in a certain time, or I want this asset to be worth something at a certain time, but I feel like I'm going uphill. And I always ask them, what do you want at this? And they give me a number. For some reason, it's always, first, if they're not at it, it'll be 5 million if they're not at that level. And I say, why 5 million and how are you going to get there? And they just sort of don't know. So the 5-year profit plan is going to work out what's those different services and how you're going to actually increase that by what percentages by bringing on what types of customers. And then it will break it down into 12 months. So it's basically going to create your next year's plan and your next year's growth journey to say, when I get asked these questions, these are why I'm saying yes or no, because of this plan that we need to execute inside the business. So it'll help you and your leadership team to get on the same page. And then the service gross margin simplified is the biggest learning that I had when I was coming through my journey. So coming from a technical person to then running a technical department that had about 40 teammates in there, actually understanding service gross margin of my department, because that's basically the profit area of my department. That tells me if sales aren't selling it for enough. It tells me if it's cost of delivery that's causing the problem and my department's costing too much. And if we compile that against other figures, like how many tickets per endpoint, how many endpoints per tech, what's our service agreements, what's our SLAs, we can then say, here's where the problem is in service. And it really stops that problem about, as an owner, your technical team coming to you saying, I need another person. Because now they know the data that backs this up and how it affects the financials in the business. And so they should now be coming to you saying, here's where my service gross margin is. Here's where my other key KPIs are. Here's where the sales pipeline is. And that's why I need another person. So if your technical owner today in your business doesn't own service gross margin and doesn't understand the P&L, that is a massive, massive sell to them for their knowledge and their journey to get that, so they are accountable for service gross margin. Both of those QR codes take you to our website. Put your details in there. We're not looking to then bombard you with things. It's free giveaways. The way I do all of our stuff is I will show you exactly what to do, and it's up to you whether you do it yourself or you ask us to help.
Getting some love hearts there, Darren. That's obviously you struck a chord. If there's any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. Otherwise, miraculously, you might get a couple of minutes back in your day. But from my side, it was great to share the screen with you, Darren, and yeah, appreciate the time. We do have a question here. Just bring this up. So, what is a typical time frame you see it taking an MSP to fix, quote unquote, their ConnectWise, i.e., build out service catalogs, etc., once you get into help?
It's a great question, and it is like peeling back an onion. You know, I've had consulting calls where it literally takes us 30 days to just smarten up the service catalog because they've got something or it's in their heads, but they are all on the same page. Whatever's in their heads is the same page. I've also had a really difficult consulting engagement, like the one that shines out to me is I had 8 hours worth of consulting calls, 8 calls all together with 4 people on a leadership team for an MSP that couldn't decide what time their IT support started because they had 4 different packages. One started at 7, one supposedly started at 9, and some in between. What we actually found out at the end of this was the phone system opened at 7. It was one number that went to all their customers, and if they rung it, they got service. So we spent 8 hours trying to work out what time they opened their phone lines, but actually it was 7 a.m. because everyone got the same service. So typically, for most MSPs, I'd say 2 to 3 months, because that's just how untwined and unstructured it is, and everybody's got a different idea. So our biggest job is actually facilitating what's the consensus once you've got all the ideas out. You know, here's all the things that I think we do and all the things we don't do, and then all the disagreements that come out of that, and sort of facilitating that down to a document that says, here's what we're going to go forward with, because now we've put it on paper. And that service calculator is probably our heaviest lift as far as an asset inside our consulting, but I would also say it's the most powerful. So it's definitely worth doing it. And honestly, if you have nothing today, just do maturity level 1, a basic document that just outlines the service, outlines the products, outlines how you onboard it, and outlines the key top 10 questions that you don't do. That will make so much difference inside your MSP.
And just very quickly to answer the question that came my way, first vendor people generally do. It's I'd say about 80% of the time it's the big distributor of some description, often has the Microsoft piece of the puzzle in it. That's what people really want to know. I quite like doing an easy and a hard, so a little, I don't know, web root or an exclaimer or a Sentinel or an RMM or something like that, plus a Microsoft, and then you get the, oh cool, well this is just when everything lines up and it's perfect, and here's the errors and we fix them. Or, oh my God, what is, if half the lines from Microsoft don't map, as an example, on the first way in, it generally means that the naming conventions are off, going back to those first couple of topics we talked about today. And the system just tells a story instantly.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would probably edge not to do Microsoft, because that's typically the one that someone's doing some sort of CSP integration. So there's some sort of backwards and forth going on. Pick the one that doesn't integrate today. That's where you're going to see the biggest eye opener.
But does not matter to us. So listen, we're over time now. Darren, big thanks, and big thank you to everyone who's joined the call. Hope you got some value out of it. And when the time's right, would love to work with, I know we do work with a handful of people here, but would love the chance to work with you when the time's right.